All right, buckle up, because what I'm about to tell you about yesterday's NBA Today segment is going to completely change how you see the Knicks' current situation. And I'm not talking about just another loss to the Celtics. This goes way deeper than a box score, way deeper than shooting percentages or plus-minus numbers. This is about organizational philosophy, about whether New York has the guts to make the move that could legitimately transform them from a good team into a championship contender. And honestly, watching Malika Andrews and the panel dissect this Nick Richards situation had me on the edge of my seat, because the implications are absolutely staggering for everything the Knicks are trying to build. Hey, what's up everyone? 1 second before we dive in, that like button right there, hit it now. Takes literally 1 second, but makes a massive difference in growing this channel and reaching more fans. Just smash that like real quick. Every like pushes this video further, so do me that favor right now. So the show opens and they're doing the usual recap of last night's Celtics-Knicks game, and everyone's talking about Jalen Brunson's rough shooting night, about Karl-Anthony Towns getting called out by his teammates and coaches, about Mike Brown's questionable rotations in that disastrous second quarter where New York blew a 14-point lead. But then Stephen A. Smith does what Stephen A. does best. He pivots the entire conversation and says something like, "Hold on, we need to talk about the elephant in the room that nobody wants to address." And that's the fact that this Knicks roster, as currently constructed, has a fatal flaw that's going to prevent them from winning a championship no matter how well Brunson plays or how many points Mikal Bridges drops. Oh, and suddenly the entire studio goes quiet because everyone knows he's right. Everyone's been thinking it, but nobody wanted to say it out loud until that moment. The fatal flaw he's talking about? Depth at the center position and the complete lack of a reliable backup big who can provide the physical presence, rim protection, and rebounding that championship teams absolutely require when their starters need rest or when injuries inevitably hit. Mitchell Robinson has been solid when healthy, but he's basically made of glass at this point, constantly dealing with injuries that limit his availability and effectiveness. Karl-Anthony Towns is obviously a phenomenal offensive player, but asking him to bang in the paint for 35 minutes a night against bruising centers while also being your primary scoring option is a recipe for disaster over an 82-game season plus playoff. And beyond those two, what do the Knicks really have? They're running lineups with undersized forward, trying to guard legitimate 7-footers. They're getting killed on the boards in crucial stretches, and opposing teams are specifically targeting those minutes when Towns sits because they know New York has no answer inside. That's when Kendrick Perkins jumps in with this absolute bomb of insider information that had everyone in the studio leaning forward, and he starts talking about how front office executives around the league have been quietly discussing Nick Richards as one of the most undervalued trade assets available right now. Richards is currently with the Phoenix Suns after they acquired him back in January, and according to Perk's sources, the Suns are actively fielding calls about him because they've got this weird logjam at the center position with Mark Williams coming over in the offseason and creating a situation where they've got too many big men competing for limited minutes. And here's where it gets really interesting. Perk specifically mentions that the Knicks have maintained long-standing interest in Richards dating back to when he was in Charlotte. And there have been preliminary conversations between New York's front office and Phoenix about what a potential deal might look like. Now let me break down why this makes so much sense from multiple angles, because this isn't just about adding another body to the rotation. This is about addressing specific tactical weaknesses that are preventing the Knicks from reaching their ceiling. Brian Windhorst was on the panel, and he starts diving into the film, showing clips from last night's game, where Jaylen Brown was just absolutely feasting in the paint during that second quarter, attacking smaller defenders over and over, getting to the rim at will. And there was literally nobody on the Knicks roster who could provide the kind of vertical rim protection to make him think twice about those drives. Windhorst's breaking down possession after possession, showing how when Towns went to the bench, the entire defensive structure collapsed because you had guys like Tyler Kolek and even at times Josh Hart trying to protect the rim against elite athletic wings, and it was just a massacre. He's pointing out specific plays where a rim protector like Richards could have completely changed the complexion of those possessions, either by altering the shot at the rim or by simply being enough of a deterrent that Brown would have to settle for a more difficult look. But here's where the conversation on NBA Today got absolutely fascinating. And this is the stuff you don't get from reading box scores or watching highlight reels. Dan Orlovsky starts breaking down the psychological impact of not having interior depth, talking about how, when Towns knows he's the only legitimate big on the roster, he feels this immense pressure to never rest, to play through fatigue and minor injury, to try and do too much because there's nobody behind him who can adequately fill that role. And that pressure manifests in the exact kinds of plays we saw last night, where Towns is drawing double teams, and instead of making the simple read and kicking it out to wide-open shooters like Josh Hart, who was 3 for 3 from deep, he's forcing contested shots through multiple defenders because he's in this mindset of, I have to score every time I touch the ball because we need my offense. Orlovsky's making the point that if you have someone like Richards who can come in and provide even just 12 to 15 solid minutes per game, suddenly Towns can relax. He can be more selective with his shot attempts. He can trust the system and his teammates because he knows the team isn't going to completely fall apart defensively during his rest period. The financial breakdown that Chini Ogwumike provided was absolutely crucial to understanding why this trade makes so much practical sense beyond just the basketball fit. Richards is making around $5 million this season, which in today's NBA is an absolute bargain for a player of his caliber and production level. The Knicks are already deep into luxury tax territory with the Towns acquisition and their other moves. But $5 million is manageable. It's the kind of number where you can make the salaries work without having to gut your rotation or sacrifice key pieces. Chinese walking through potential trade scenarios, showing how New York could package a couple of second-round picks and maybe a young player who's fallen out of the rotation. And suddenly, you've acquired a legitimate starting-caliber center who's perfectly content coming off the bench and doing the dirty work that championship teams require. Stephen A. went on this incredible rant about Tom Thibodeau's coaching philosophy and how Richards represents exactly the prototype of player that Thibs has built his entire career around. We're talking about a 7-footer who doesn't need plays called for him, who derives his value from effort and physicality rather than offensive skill, who can switch on pick and rolls, protect the rim, crash the offensive glass, and just generally make life miserable for opposing big men. Stephen A. is pulling up examples from Thibs' time in Chicago, with guys like Taj Gibson and Joakim Noah, showing how he's always valued these high-energy defensive-minded bigs who might not put up gaudy scoring numbers, but who make winning plays that don't show up in traditional statistics. And Richards fits that mold perfectly. He's averaged something like 10 points and 8 rebounds per game over the past couple seasons, but his impact goes way beyond those numbers. When you look at metrics like screen assists, charges drawn, contested shots at the rim, offensive rebound percentage, all the little things that compound over the course of a playoff series. The panel started discussing the broader implications of this potential move and how it would impact the Knicks' entire rotation and strategic flexibility. And this is where you really see the genius of what Leon Rose and the front office could be cooking up. Mad Dog Russo made this brilliant observation about how having Richards would allow Mike Brown to be much more aggressive with his defensive schemes because he'd have the personnel to actually execute them. Right now, when Towns is on the bench, the Knicks basically have to play a more conservative drop coverage because they don't have anyone who can adequately protect the rim, which allows opposing point guards to get into the paint and create advantages all night long. But if you have Richards available, suddenly you can switch more liberally. You can pressure the ball higher up the floor. You can play that aggressive trapping style that Thibs loves because you've got a legitimate eraser behind you if someone breaks down the initial point of attack. What really resonated with me watching this entire segment was how much emphasis the panel placed on the championship pedigree and winning culture aspects of a move like this. It's not just about Richards as an individual player, it's about the message you send to your roster and to the rest of the league when you identify a weakness and aggressively move to address it rather than hoping it fixes itself or making excuses. Molly Karam brought up how the Lakers during their championship runs would constantly tinker with their roster at the margins, bringing in guys like Trevor Ariza and Shannon Brown who weren't superstars, but who filled specific roles that complemented the core, and that's exactly what Richards would represent for these Knicks. You've already got your stars in Brunson and Towns and Bridges. Now you're filling in the connective tissue with players who understand their role and execute it at a high level night after night. The psychological boost this move could provide to the locker room cannot be overstated, and this was something Brian Windhorst really hammered home toward the end of the segment. When you're Karl Anthony Towns and you've just been publicly called out by your coach and teammates after a frustrating loss, seeing your front office immediately go out and address the depth concerns by acquiring a quality backup, Big sends a powerful message that the organization is serious about winning, that they're not content with moral victories or first-round exit, that they're doing everything possible to put you in position to succeed. It alleviates pressure, it builds trust between players and management, and it creates this culture of accountability and continuous improvement that separates championship organizations from the also-rans who make the same mistakes year after year. Stephen A. wrapped the segment with one of his classic monologues about how the Knicks are at this critical crossroads moment where they can either be bold and make the moves necessary to compete with Boston and Milwaukee and the other elite Eastern Conference teams, or they can play it safe and convince themselves that their current roster is good enough, and then wonder why they flame out in the second round again. And he's absolutely right. Watching last night's game where they had Boston on the ropes multiple times but couldn't close because of interior defensive breakdowns, you have to ask yourself what you're willing to do to fix those glaring weaknesses. Richards is available, the price isn't prohibitive, the fit is obvious, and the timing is perfect with the trade deadline approaching, and the Knicks still very much in the mix as a top 4 seed in the East. The comparison Perk made to how the Celtics built their championship roster by identifying and acquiring high-value role players at reasonable costs was absolutely spot on. Boston didn't win last year just because of Tatum and Brown. They won because they had guys like Derek White and Al Horford and Drew Holiday, who understood their roles and executed them flawlessly in the biggest moments. Richards could be that same type of addition for New York, someone who won't make all-star teams or win individual awards, but who provides exactly what you need exactly when you need it over the course of a grueling playoff run. And the fact that he's only 27 years old means this isn't just a rental for this season. He could potentially be part of the core moving forward if things work out well, giving the Knicks that sustainable interior depth that's been missing for years. What absolutely killed me watching this segment was the frustration you could hear in everyone's voices about how obvious this move seems. Yet there's always this hesitation from front offices to pull the trigger on deals that aren't blockbusters, but that address real needs. Nobody's suggesting Richards turns the Knicks into instant title favorites, but he absolutely makes them better equipped to handle the inevitable challenges that arise during an 82-game season and playoffs. He gives Mike Brown more lineup flexibility, he takes pressure off Towns both physically and mentally, he provides insurance against injury, and he gives New York another legitimate defensive weapon they can deploy against the elite scoring big men that populate the Eastern Conference. For the cost of some second-round picks and a roster fringe player, that's the definition of a no-brainer move that could pay enormous dividends come April and May when rotations tighten and every possession matters.